Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. So I found these really fun vintage style fishing guide books at my local op shop, and once I started flicking through them, I was really captivated by the illustrations that were within the pages of each of these books, and I really got inspired to create a project that I'm lovingly calling the Fisherman's Basket. And basically I just wanted to compile all the illustrations out of these books into one beautiful paper project. So this will be part one of our Fisherman's Basket compilation series as I work through this dream project that I've had in my mind ever since I saw these books. And basically it started with an absolutely enormous amount of fussy cutting. I really underestimated not only how many fish there actually were once I took them all out of the books, but also how long it was going to take to cut them out. So I did do a lot of that off camera, and I just wanted to show you what that looked like in real time. Basically, actually this is not real time, this is fast forwarded, but basically I just went in with my scissors and lovingly, painstakingly cut out each fish one by one. Once I'd cut out all the fish, it was time to decide what book I was going to use to create the pages of our Fisherman's Basket artist project. And this book, a copy of Jessica that I found literally in the trash. It was in the cardboard bin at the dump, and I, kind of very gracefully grabbed it. And this book certainly is the right size for the pages, and it's got that beautiful aging to it as well. So this was certainly a strong contender. You can see here I'm just sort of measuring. A good way to sort of check if you already have your paper assets ready to add to a page in a project like this. It's good to grab basically the largest one that you can find and just make sure that it's going to fit on the page. Another option I had was this illustrated dictionary, and it was on death's door as well. This was one I pulled out of the trolleys at my local op shop. They dispose of books each day that they don't deem to be sellable, and they pop them out for people to grab, and basically anything that doesn't get taken that day goes to the landfill. So this turned out to be a lucky find on my behalf, because it is a beautiful book. And what I sort of thought as I was flicking through was that because it has little teeny tiny illustrations, it actually will alleviate the need for lots and lots of extra decorating and details on the page. It's kind of already got a little bit of interest in the column work of the text, but also within those illustrations. So once I sort of decided, yes, this was the one, I went through and picked out the pages that I would need, sort of enough to have front to back. So having all of the rips go down one side means you sort of have to have one page going one way and one page going the other way. I hope that makes sense, but you'll see as we go along what I mean. Next, I sort of wanted to figure out what other ephemera we were going to need to build up each of the pages of this Fisherman's Basket. And I grabbed out these academic kind of graph papers in all different styles. And the reason being was because the print on these actually matches another ephemera piece that I'd picked out, which is some little bingo tickets. What are they called? It's like bingo tickets, I guess. Raffle tickets, that's the one. That's what we're, we get there in the end, don't we? Raffle tickets. And see how the blues kind of complement each other? That was also kind of a bit of a lucky find that both of those sort of went together well. So the next step is to go through, and I actually ended up doing 2 of each of the 3 different graph papers. So 6 sheets of that, gave it a nice go over with some coffee dye. This is just to give everything a little bit of more of an aged look and a little bit of variation in the color of the page. And then I also did that with our book pages, and I did that only on one side. So instead of having a book page being double-sided, if that makes sense, we're working on back to front each page as a separate piece of paper, if that makes sense. So we'll be working on each page separately and then gluing them together one at a time as we go through the book. But the first process step in preparing our pages is getting the coffee dye on the page and letting it work its magic. Next up, we're going to be working on the numbers for our pages, so the number asset as the next piece of ephemera we're using, or we're actually making almost all of the ephemera we're using today, we're making from scratch. So I didn't really need the R. I contemplated keeping the R on the page and just went through with a ruler. Obviously you saw me there just tearing the R off. We're just keeping the numbers at this stage. And then I went through and typed lovingly and painstakingly typed up all of the species identification names for the all the different various types of fish. Now, because I'd already cut the fish out, just as a top tip, I did take a photo of the fish with its species name before I cut them out, just so that I would have reference as to what was called what, to help future me with getting those all identified correctly. The next step is to figure out which type of paper to use to actually print out all of those species identification labels. And I had two options there, sort of like a light, it's kind of a very light blue. It's coming up grey on camera, but in person it's kind of got a little bit of very, very faint teal in it. And the other option was that creamy bony colour that you can see just to the left of frame. So I ended up going with the greyish, bluish teal colour. I thought that had a nice contrast to it, and just sort of thought that that tied in better with the blue that is in the other paper assets that we've been making for our page. And then I went through one by one and cut out all the labels, just the old-fashioned way, one at a time. They did end up being having a little bit of variation in the size, so there's really no other way to do it other than having like a uniform size label, which you can then use a cutter for, but I didn't have that on me, so you just got to do things the old-fashioned way sometimes. And at this point, my fish count number had come in at 97, I believe. 97 fish. So bear that in mind as you're watching these clips, that I did have to rinse and repeat every process 97 times to accomplish the part one of this Fisherman's Basket project. So, you know, snacks, coffee, all these things helped to get me through. So the coffee dyed pages were all dry and ready to use, and I went through and separated them into all the three different types and styles there, and just basically glued all the numbers on, taking care to, when I was sticking them down, because obviously they're not in any particular order at this point, they're all just going in randomly in terms of the number, but I did want to try and just make sure that when I was gluing them down that I wasn't doing two sequential numbers, so that if they happened to be on a page that was facing one another, the ticket styles would be different on each page and not be the same. So that was the only thing I really paid attention to when doing this. Otherwise, just freehand sticking them down, leaving roughly the same amount of space between each one, so that, again, I didn't have to really measure anything. I just went in freehand with my scissors, kind of cutting halfway around each one as I went around each of the 97 numbers. And they looked really, really good. Already I was happy with how the coffee dye was sort of dispersed unevenly, and each of the pages actually kind of ended up looking a little bit different after the coffee bath. So that was really, it's always interesting, like every time you dye something with coffee it's different, and it never ceases to surprise me how beautiful it looks when you get it on the page like that. It's really, really pretty. So it gives it that, just that beautiful vintage feel, and then you don't don't have to worry about inking around the edges of things or laying down any other paint or detail. It just really does its job really beautifully. So then it was a matter of, as I said, just cutting them out one at a time, and sort of leaving roughly the same amount of space around each ticket as I went. Once they were all cut out, it was time for a little layout check. I was doing this incrementally as I was going through each process, because obviously, you know, you have it in your mind that everything's going to fit, but as I was creating these assets by hand one by one, you just want to make sure that they are going to all fit. So far so good. Then I wanted to start building up some more detail and add some more interest to each page, and the way we're going to do that firstly is by adding some of this really beautiful vintage music paper. I was lucky enough to find this at my local op shop, and there were just enough pages for me to use it in this project, and basically just trying to figure out what sized pieces I could get from each sheet, and therefore how many pages I could get out of each sheet, if that makes sense. So I worked out basically I could get about 1/8 out of each sheet of music paper. So the goal here is to now fold it into basically 1/8, and then we can then use our bone folder to get those lines nice and crisp, and use our ruler to tear them. And tearing the edges, of course, is going to bring extra texture and just a nice rough line on the page. When selecting the music sheets, I did kind of notice that there were some variations in not only the size of the music notes and things that were printed on the page, but also the weight of the ink. So I tried to build up an eclectic mix, just so that, again, when you're turning the page, your eye is sort of seeing something a little bit different each time and with each turn of the page. And this music paper did not need any help. It was already beautifully aged, and didn't need any extra inking, dyeing, nothing. It was beautiful just as it was, ready, good to go straight out of the book. Isn't it always such a privilege? This is something I always say in my videos, is that no ephemera is too special to use in your projects, because the more special the ephemera, the more special your project. So instead of worrying that the project isn't good enough for the ephemera or special enough for the ephemera, use the special ephemera to make your project special. So this was definitely that point in case where this always feels like such a privilege to find something so special. And in this case, this project was very much a labor of love, and again, feels like such a privilege to be using such beautiful paper to bring the vision to life. I'd love to know down in the comments, have there ever been certain pieces of ephemera that you've either, maybe tried not to use, or have felt like, I couldn't possibly, but then found just the right project to include it in? Or are there still pieces of ephemera in your stash where you just haven't quite found the right thing to use it in yet? I would love to know, or I would love to hear just about pieces of ephemera that you have or have found in general. Like, that's always something that I love to talk to people about, is like, what have you got in your stash? Tell me, I want to know. The final job on this first day of the Fisherman's Basket project was to get all the fish in order and to label them correctly. So we are on day 2, and the jobs for today are to build up all of the structure of the page and decorate them with all of the handmade ephemera that we made yesterday. So the first job of the day is to get all of the little music sheet segments onto the page. And I, again, wasn't too fussy about this, but I did try to keep the music part of the page, especially if it was on a corner and it had like a blank border around the edge, to get that into the most visual part of the page. So for example, this piece here that has a border around it, I sort of want that border to be as covered as possible and expose as much of the actual music print as possible. So by putting the border in the center of the page, I know that that's mostly going to be covered up by fish, if that makes sense, and then have the music sheet and therefore the torn edge of the music print be the most exposed. Then we're going to add just another level of detail, and this is going to help the page feel kind of a bit more, even more broken in and layered, but with a very simple technique. And you know, it's my favorite thing to do is to get some delicious scrunched up tissue paper and get it on the page. You know, I've said it before, I will say it again. It is such a good way of adding some beautiful layer and texture to a page without too much visual stimulus and without impacting your design too much, but it is just going to give it that beautiful rustic look. So I'm not paying, again, too much attention to the shape. It's more of a size that I'm trying to conform to here, just sort of, again, like about a piece about the size of my hand, I suppose, in a rough rectangle shape. But the more mismatched the shape, the better. That's only going to help these tissue paper pieces look more natural as you lay them down on the page, because of course all of your pages that you're doing are different, so rough shapes are always best. And then we're giving them a good old scrunch, and then that'll give like some nice crinkled texture to the page. And then as we stick them down, we are going to make sure that the matte side of the tissue paper, because it does have a slight gloss on one side, so rub your finger over it and just check that the matte side is facing up. I guess that's a personal preference, I just prefer that. It's not a big deal either way, but it does, one side of tissue paper does just have that slight gloss to it. So we're going to get the tissue paper down in an area that feels like it's kind of in the middle of the page, but again, I do want this to feel rough and naturally occurring. So you can see here that they've all sort of turned out just that little bit different. So now we're up to actually constructing the pages of our book. And as you can see, I did have a right hand facing page and a left hand facing page, and by that I mean when I tore them out of the book, you can see on the bottom of frame there that there is a rough torn out edge that's always on the bottom of the page. And the way I achieved that is when I was ripping the pages out of the book and selecting which pages to use, I made sure that I took half of them going one way and half of them going the other way, so that they would then all line up and have all of the rough edges be on the bottom. So then it's a matter of gluing them front to back, and you will have then obviously half the amount of pages to work with. But we are going to, I just used a little one of those sticker thingies there to line up where to put the holes, and obviously once you've done one, the pages are all uniform, so you can go through and just use that as a template to mark out where the binding holes are going to go on each page, and just use a basic hole punch to punch those out. And it's time! Oh my goodness, after all of that prep, hours of prep, we can start assembling our fisherman's basket pages one at a time. So we are starting on page 1, and isn't she glorious? So we are going to start by adding just one more piece of ephemera, which is some of this gorgeous blue gingham washi tape. And that is again just going to highlight some of those blues again into our collage. So to make the flag, all I've done is just cut a little triangle at the very tip of the edge of your washi tape. Work out roughly where that's going to sit on the page, lay it down, and then trim it off. And then the next time you will do the same thing. So you just go in on the corner, add a triangle shape, so come in from one diagonal to the other diagonal to make a little flag, and put that down on the page. It's just kind of bringing in some more intention into the composition of the page, and also just to add a little bit more fun as well and some more color. It just so happened that the tags were blue, and that sort of lends itself obviously beautifully to this project because the fish are obviously under the sea, and we don't have too many other references to the ocean in general in this project. So this is kind of a nice subtle way of bringing that, bringing the ocean vibes. Now, speaking of ocean vibes, on the edge of this ticket here, and I don't know if I held it up to the camera, I might have held it up to the camera close enough for you to see, that on the edge of the raffle ticket is actually a row of little tiny turtles. And they are so cute. Like, they were so cute. In the end though, and if you know, and I know you do know, when you're doing your craft projects, sometimes your paper projects, sometimes you have to sacrifice some cute, things that happen to fall on the back of pages, etc. And I just felt that the composition was just a little bit stronger and a bit less fussy and a bit less messy without those little turtles. And it sort of made it easy then to integrate all of the tagging and labeling of the page into one little collage. So a little collage moment up there, a little cluster of all of our ephemera in one little collaged area. So as sad as I was to see those little turtles go, I do think it was the right move because everything just looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit neater, because at the end of the day, we want the focus to be on these incredible fish illustrations. They are the star, and that's another reason why adding the tissue paper and building up these background layers is a beautiful way of adding detail to the page, but not something that's going to impact your focal point of the page, which is obviously all of our beautiful fish. And so once again, I repeated that process, and you can see in this clip here that I did have to sort of rearrange our little cluster of ephemera for the labeling on the left-hand pages, because obviously if I'd repeated it the same way, they would have been tucked up in the corner of the page, and I want all of the labeling to be on the outside corners facing outwards. Next, we are going to add one more gorgeous flourish to this page in the form of some more subtle texture, which is with some beautiful sewing. And I picked out this beautiful thread that again was in that sort of really light, slightly turquoise blue. And this is just, again, going to add something different to the page without it being too bold, too overwhelming, but good for structure of the page as well. And who doesn't love a little bit of stitching on your page? It just always brings something so special and so beautiful to the page. So I did this by just running around, as you can see, from across the top, giving it a little turn, going down the adjacent angle of the page, and then a little turn, and then finishing off, rounding out the corner. No need to go up where the binding will be. That will all obviously be glued down, so you don't need to worry about including stitching on that side. We are back. This took a really, really long time, way longer than I'd anticipated, and I did have a bit of an issue where the particular washi tape that I'd picked out ran out. So there was a moment there where I had to wait for a pack to arrive, and I just got a little 2-pack that sort of had 2 different blue tartan or blue plaid that was very much similar to the one that I'd originally picked out. And these types of little snags, pun intended, not only challenge you as you're working and sort of, overcome hurdles, but for me, it certainly helps with my perfectionism trait and allows me to work like more freely and not be so caught up in the detail of, you know, things being perfect or matchy. So this is where we got to. It is, it ended up being, my particular one ended up being 97 pages. And that's a lot. Again, longer than what I'd anticipated. But I am so happy with how it turned out. It's exactly what I'd planned and what I had in my mind for the pages of this book. So just to do a quick recap, we pulled all the pages out of our thesaurus, or I think it was actually an illustrated dictionary. We coffee dyed them. We added some vintage music paper pieces into different positions on the page. We scrunched up some white tissue paper and added that in, again, various areas on the pages. We made little tags out of various different lined academic style paper with a little, these are not vintage, but just a little ticket book ticket to number the pages. We added a flag with some washi tape. We ended up using 3 different washi tapes in the style of, in the colorway of this blue. The blue in this little ticket here really is what then determined the sort of complementary or contrasting color scheme for the pages. So had this been red, maybe I would have gone with red. Had it been brown, I would have gone with brown. But it's just something to sort of make this blue line not look so out of place on the page. We printed off, I typed up and printed off these little custom genome specification labels, added a little sticker there, again in the same color, and then we used the pretty blue thread to just add some stitching. And because I did assemble this all just with a glue stick, that thread is really going to help keep the actual structure of the page together. So that's going to do it for this video. I'm sorry it was just absolutely all over the place, but as I said, it did take me longer to film than I'd planned. We had some snags in terms of the plan going awry, some materials that needed to be replaced, and obviously I grossly underestimated the volume of fishies that I'd cut out and had planned to use in this project, thus making it much larger than what I had initially planned. Now, one thing I did want to mention before we finish up is that the very last page I've left blank with purpose. This is going to basically serve as the holder or the placement for our cover for this fisherman's basket, and so we really do want that last page to be blank so that we can use this as the last page and to hold our cover in place. So that's going to do it for part 1 of our fisherman's basket series, and as we create this really beautiful something a bit different art book. And if you've enjoyed this, let me know down in the comments if you have any questions. I will do my best, as always, I will do my best to answer them, and I will see you for part 2. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead. Talk soon. Bye bye.